have you had a chance to meet Amir Muhammad, Harry Billups, and talk to him, and what was that like?
Yeah, I've had a number of conversations with him. The latest, I think, was just a few days ago, actually. And, he's living out in Georgia and just living his life and taking care of his family and trying to avoid all this. And I think he thought it was all behind him until this most recent book came out by Randolph Sullivan, just resurrecting all of these old claims. And so I did the same thing with him that I've did with Reggie. I said, you need to get out there and defend yourself, man. Publicly defend yourself. Because when people see you and hear you, they're going to have a completely different impression than what they have by what they've been told in these books. You sit down. He's a very intelligent guy, very articulate, very kind and respectful. He's educated. There's nothing about him at all that resonates like, wow, that sounds like, somebody who would have done this. It's not that impression that you get. And then, of course, we know factually, just because of all the evidence that was proposed to stand up against him was all, disproven. But I think that for him, his decision is just to stay in the cut and not come out and do anything about it. So
Now, James, what do you think about that? Because Reggie Wright because Reggie Wright was quiet for many, many years. No one had heard from him, and he decided to come out, defend himself. But for whatever reason, Harry Billups hasn't publicly said a word. Am I right on that? He's never publicly said a word.
No, the only thing he's ever done in his own defense is he went to a deposition. He was summoned to a deposition as a result of the Wallace lawsuit. He went to the deposition, and almost immediately after that deposition, he was dropped from the lawsuit.
What do you think about that, James? Two different approaches. Reggie decides to defend himself. Harry Billups, Amir Muhammad decides not to.
It really all depends on the person. He just don't want to deal with it. Reggie was like that at first too, but then when you told Reggie he needed to get out there and defend himself, Reggie took it. Reggie is smashing everybody that got something to say to him.
Yeah.
So Reggie found a way to deal with it, and that's his way. Getting that and proving to everybody that this person is whoop whoop whoop. You ain't good enough to talk about me like that. So I advise people not to talk about Reggie. But this guy, why? Why go out there and start talking and then somebody take the smallest thing and make it out of something real big, and then now he's really in the loop. Oh, you heard he said this? He doing the right thing. Live your life. Don't worry about what nobody else got to say about you, and just do you. Stay away from all this. It's just unfortunate that you have people out here trying to eat off something that happened 23 years ago, and they don't realize that it's still affecting people that's still alive today. It's hurting them.
And they don't take into consideration that it's not just him. He's got a wife, he's got kids, he's got neighbors, he's got coworkers, and people talk.
Exactly.
And they'll form opinions off of what they've been told. And that's where I take issue with these guys, that factually he's completely innocent. He's so exonerated that the fact that these people are still pursuing and advocating for that bullshit story, it's so irresponsible and disrespectful.
So is this? I haven't had a chance to look at Randall's new book, but I'm sure you've read everything.
Mm-hmm.
Is he repeating some of the same stuff in the LAByrinth book in the new book as well?
Yeah, it's kind of like the sequel. It's just the same narrative, same storyline, but the conspiracy has grown massively. Now it's just not a dirty cop and his high school or his college buddy. Now it's a dirty cop, his college buddy, the United States Attorney's Office, the FBI, the LAPD, the district attorneys, all these. Now there's 200 people involved in this conspiracy who are all agreeing to risk their reputations, their careers, and their lives to cover up for David Mack.
And this is not a novel. Okay. It sounds like a novel the way you describe it.
It's ludicrous. The idea that all of these people most of who don't even know each other, from all of these different walks of life and all these different agencies, are all going to collectively agree that we need to suppress all this information in order to protect David Mack and Amir Muhammad.
Now, at that Slow Burn event, it seemed like you guys must have a history. It wasn't just that one night you guys went at it. can you explain the history that you and Mr. Sullivan have to where it seems like as soon as you guys are on the same stage, you're going at it? What's the history like between you guys?
This isn't friendly. I mean, he has disrespected and abused the memory of my friend Russell Poole.
I have disrespected
You have,
Russell Poole.
certainly.
We can't hear you, Greg.
I have done nothing other than say that I thought that Russ lost his objectivity. I said that I knew that in the end years.
Okay, well,
there is no way, hold on a second, there is no way that I have maligned him more than you did in your own book by describing his life. I mentioned his professional career and what I thought he did objectively wrong.
Russell's family loves me. They love everything I've written about him. I don't think they feel he was
Of course they don't, because I opposed his theory.
Okay, well, I don't want to, if we're going to talk about the differences, then I've got
I'm
to
saying
be
that
specific.
I've personally maligned him, because I never have. There's no personal history. I've never met him before. I've never talked to him before. In fact, that was one of my points last night on the stage. I was like, you know, you're publishing all of this. You have information. And you should, if you're a responsible journalist and you really want to find out the truth, you need to get as many different perspectives on things as you can. If somebody's accused of something, you need to go talk to that person and get their side of the story, right? And, you know, he makes these wild accusations against me. He never made any attempt whatsoever to come and talk to me to say, hey, Greg, well, this is what I heard. I'm going to write a book. You have an opportunity here to either correct this or provide at least your perspective on it. That's what you do when you're looking for the truth. That's what you do when you want to publish something with a responsible, objective perspective. It's not what they do. What they want to do is continue with this bullshit narrative that's completely disproven in the hopes that they can continue to mislead people into believing this wild-ass theory about this huge cover-up. The very first thing I did when I got assigned to this investigation was I read the book LAByrinth, and I found it to be very compelling. I thought, wow, if this is true, this is really interesting stuff. And so we began to build an investigative strategy where we were going to take all the competing theories, the Southside Crips, Suge Knight and the Mob Piru, Russell Poole with the Dirty Cop. We just looked at everything practical. We weren't doing the ones that were way off, like Tupac, with certain people like, clues came in from everywhere. Let me tell you, we were just overwhelmed. We took the things that were the most plausible and began to work with them. The first one we really dove into was Russell Poole's. And we began to look at the foundation of his claims. And faster than we expected, we were able to determine that the foundation fell apart. And everything that was built on that foundation necessarily had to fall with it. And so when we began to investigate those claims, in a matter of months, we knew that Russell Poole's theory could not hold mustard, that we could not use his theory as a viable proposition for the crime. And that's what so often happens in these type of either debates or, you know, these arguments, is that when they can't disprove your facts, then they just personally attack you. And that seems to be the approach that they take. Well, we can't disprove the facts, so now we have to smear his reputation.
Yeah, like that one part where he was talking about Miss Wallace and the tape was supposed to be hidden or whatever. Mm-hmm. Now, when she seen that, she got mad. And a lot of people don't know that. But people think that the purpose of talking to her and dealing with her or you coming in is to discredit that so they can drop the lawsuit. Mm. And once the lawsuit was dropped, now here come all the shenanigans again. But when she didn't know that about the hidden tape, explain that, how that went last night. Yeah, so during the trial, there was a allegation that the LAPD was suppressing some evidence.
Which trial can you explain?
After Biggie was killed and the book LAByrinth was published, based on the information in the book, it compelled an attorney to contact Mrs. Wallace and say, look, if these claims are true, then the LAPD is culpable in the murder of your son. We ought to sue him. That led to a lawsuit in 2002, roughly. And so that lawsuit, as it began to go through the motions of court, got to a point where their attorneys argued that we were suppressing evidence. So they came to the police department. on the judge's orders, and they found some material that was in the desk of the investigator that was assigned to the case at the time, a guy named Stephen Katz. And they found a tape from a jailhouse informant named Kenneth Boagney. So they made this big deal about it. Look, man, here's proof. They're suppressing evidence. Look, this detective interviewed a guy, and this guy says that Rafael Perez was involved in this murder. And you're familiar with Rafael Perez, the Rampart scandal guy. And so that went, to court, and the judge was like, hell yeah, this is clearly inappropriate suppression of evidence. So she issued a sanction against the city for like $1 million and declared a mistrial. Well, shortly thereafter, the attorneys for the city came in and said, well, hold a minute. Here's the evidence that this stuff had been turned over. We weren't hiding anything. And all of this material was readily available. It was distributed through different channels in the LAPD. And the judge then said, well, she realized that she'd been played. And but the damage was done. The mistrial was declared. And now it was a matter of putting everything back in motion. So that's what took place. But to my point, like last night, you've got him saying, well, this really rare ammo out there that Biggie was killed with. It's never been seen before. It's so unique, which is all bullshit. There was stores all over the South County that had that ammunition available to anybody that walked in and wanted to buy it. And then I pulled out the document showing that, look, just within a few months of Biggie's murder, that ammunition was showing up on other crime scenes. So really, how rare is that?
But you referred to the fact that Biggie had been killed by some relatively rare German ammunition. And that's in your book.
Okay.
Actually, that ammunition, it's called Gecko ammunition. It's a German bullet. It's only ever been used in one crime in the history of the United States, according to the FBI.
This is great.
Which is up to that. I'm not talking about since, I'm not talking about up to that time.
Okay.
Greg, I have that from Phil Carson, who was the FBI's lead investigator.
Did you ever say, Greg, do you think this is true? You've written in your book.
Just a second, you're gonna let me finish.
Let's move off of that, because I think that what people want to know is what you guys think. Well, this is a critical question.
What Greg left out is that ammunition, that incredibly rare ammunition, an entire case of boxes of it were found in the garage of David Mack. You left that out of your book.
Because it never happened.
It did happen. The FBI took.
I have their property report. Why would it be listed on
You
there?
know what? Then Phil Carson's a liar and fraud.
Well, then you should get to Phil Carson. Phil Carson.
So I feel like this is something that can actually.
That's in the LA.
I have Hey, respond to something.
Okay.
I think I have right.
Let's move on, because people want to learn.
Gecko ammunition, rare ammunition. Biggie Smalls was in fact killed with this ammunition that they then began to tout as rare ammunition. The reason they said that is because it's only distributed in 2 places in the United States. It's imported from Germany. They have a wholesale warehouse in New Jersey, and there's a wholesale warehouse in Corona, California. 2 places, wholesale. It's sold all over Southern California. There was 14 different gun stores that sold this ammunition. After Tupac Shakur was killed in Las Vegas, and there was raids done at the Southside Crips house because they believed that they were involved in Tupac's murder, Gecko ammunition was being found in the houses of those Southside Crip gang members. This is before Biggie's killed. Here's a report right here, an analyzed evidence report from 4/2/97. Wilshire Division, same division that Biggie Smalls was killed in. 3 weeks after, Gecko ammunition is used in another crime.
That was their claim, that it's never been used in the history of the United States in any type of crime.
Now, was the gun that was used to kill Pac ever recovered? Because on that A&E documentary, the one Who Killed Tupac, hosted by Benjamin Crump, the civil rights attorney, they claim to have found the gun in the backyard of a Southside Compton Crips house.
Yeah, so it was never conclusively proven to be the gun. There was good reason to believe it could have been, because there was issues with Corey Edwards. He was the individual who was out in Las Vegas with the rest of the Southside Crips when Pac was shot. And Corey Edwards was really, he wasn't down with all that. He wasn't trying to be part of that. And so they thought he was kind of ranking out. And so when the murder went down and Corey had kind of distanced himself from it, they saw that he was just maybe too soft or whatever. and the gun may have been tossed in his backyard just to kind of with him. That was the working theory. I don't know if that's true or not, but a .40 caliber Glock was found in the backyard of his girlfriend's parents' house, actually in Compton, and we recovered the gun. And or actually, Compton had recovered the gun. We took it to Las Vegas to test it and compare it against the ballistics in Tupac's case, but the analysts out in Las Vegas said that it wasn't a match. So we had to accept that.
Had to accept it, even though there's been rumors that the Las Vegas District Attorney's Office doesn't even want to touch this case.
Yeah, I have to just stick with what we're being told. I can't draw that conclusion that they're intentionally.
Because they have nothing to gain to even charge anyone in this. Because everyone would have to be dragged back to Vegas. Mm-hmm. The trial would take place there. And this is just a city that doesn't want that type of attention.
Yeah, and at this point in time, there's really nobody to drag back, other than Keefe D and his own confessions of his involvement. The other guys in the car are all dead. The guy who gave the gun to Keefe D, he's dead.
Von Zip,
yeah. So all of these guys that would potentially be either co-conspirators or co-defendants, they're all gone. And there's no real witnesses who can come and say, yeah, I was there. Keefe D was the one who was in the car and had the gun and was participating in the murder. So you've basically got Keefe D testifying against Keefe D. Hard case to take to court.
Did you ever find the car, the white Cadillac? I believe it was a rental car. Did you ever track it down through VIN number or anything to see if there's any forensics on that car?
No, unfortunately. I think that's an area that maybe the ball got dropped on Las Vegas's part. By the time we came onto the scene, we're 10 years after the fact. So to go back and try to get records on a rental car from 10 years, those don't exist. They're purged out of the system.
So it's impossible then to know, because that car might be sitting in someone's backyard or it might be in a junkyard,
Yeah.
Now, these days, yeah, that was a long time ago. Didn't nobody have no license plate number or nothing to find that car. The first person that seen that car was me at the 662.
You saw the white Cadillac.
Yeah, they was there. Yeah, they was there. And being chased and all of that, and wasn't nobody thinking about getting no license plate number.
But since it was a rental car, it seemed to be a car that would be easily tracked.
Who name? But you got to know who name it is. That's pretty much hard though, Alex.
There was some information that probably could have been followed up on better. It was that the driver of that car, a guy named Terrence Brown, they called him Bubble Up. T. Brown, his mom, it was either his mother or his mother-in-law, was the one who actually had rented the car over at the Enterprise at LAX. And so if we had known that, or if law enforcement had known that back at the time, potentially they could have run down that lead and found out that there was a connection between T. Brown and the car. That would have been monumental.
But even still, for y'all records today, can y'all go back and look and see if that was a white Cadillac, whatever color it was, to make the model the whole nine?
Yeah, no, because all those records were purged. Those rental car companies, after a period of time, they just purge their records. They don't keep them indefinitely for, 2 decades.
Yeah, but Enterprise, for example, takes all their cars that are like 2 years old and they put them on an Enterprise lot, and then they sell them to the public.
Right.
Those records still exist because they have to track who'd you sell it to. You had to put insurance on the car. There has to be a payment plan, so that means it was financed. So there's got to be records on these cars.
I guess the point I'm trying to make is that first you'd have to go to a rental or to Enterprise and say, here's a name. That's purged. So if you were to go to them and say, hey, 20 years ago, they'd be, we don't have those records of Mrs. Brown. And that's the only way where you're going to be able to track the car, because through her name is the only.
Basically, it's all lost.
How about this? You've learned about this in 2006, 2007, right?
2009, really.
2009, okay.
Yeah.
So 13 years later, you know that they rented a car from Enterprise, a white Cadillac, a 96 Cadillac. How many of them could there have been? And they have records of all the VIN numbers. They probably don't have a record of who rented it,
Right.
but the identity of the car should still be recorded somewhere, right? with the VIN number and the license plate.
Yeah, theoretically, you're right. That
Well, even if they got the card, I mean, 13 years later, you ain't gonna get nothing off of it.
Well, apparently they got shot back at. I'm just looking at it as a piece of evidence that was never looked at. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah. Okay. So let's say that you were able to do that from a practical standpoint. Let's say you identified the car and it still exists and you could go recover it. That connects you to Terrence Brown, right? Who's dead. Connects you to Keefe D by way of, his own confession of saying he's in that car. So what does that actually do as far as a potential prosecution? What's the value of that knowledge or that evidence today?
It's too late.
Yeah. Well, in 2006, what year did Terrence Brown get killed?
He died in, it was just a few years ago, really.
Yeah, he was still alive.
He was still alive.
When our task force started.
That's correct. Yes, that's correct. And I'll just concede to the fact that that effort wasn't made.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's get to some of Reggie's points that he wanted you to cover. I guess this first one, Gene Deal been doing a lot of talking on this case lately.
Oh, man, I've seen that guy, and I really don't want to even comment on that cat because I don't know him. He said some. I ain't never seen this dude. I don't care nothing about this. Nigga, you live in New York. What is you talking about? Reggie and James.
He said that?
He said this a couple of months ago. But I'm not going to even reply to that because you don't know me to say that. If that's how you feel, I mean, Gene Deal can come to Gangster Chronicles to sit down and we could talk. He could bring his people, but after the fact, we can move this table and Gene Deal handle his business. That's the only way he could talk to me and talk. I don't want to hear that shit. I ain't finna be no studio gangster. I ain't finna be talking from Gangster Chronicles to your little ragged ass podcast or whatever you doing on your couch. And just go back and forth. I'm not finna do none of that shit. But yeah, he been talking. So I went and looked up Gene Deal and Mace. And the video I watched that Mace got on this video and was telling him, y'all had guns too. Why y'all didn't shoot at the cat that shot Biggie? They actually sat there and watched Biggie get shot. Nobody don't know that. But Mace put it out there. Y'all had guns, y'all the security. Why y'all didn't shoot this dude?
Well, I don't know, but for anyone who's 45 and under, they don't know who Mace is. But Mace was one of the top rappers on Bad Boy Records in the early 90s. I think he was actually on before Biggie was on. But I guess Gene Deal was present when Biggie got killed.
Yeah, he was there.
Gene Deal was the bodyguard for Bad Boy for Puff. So even though I know you don't want to hear nothing he got to say, do you think he has any value, Greg, of being present and what his story is?
Of course. Whatever his observations were that night need to be taken into consideration. He did have this encounter or, kind of a soft encounter with a guy that he perceived as a Nation of Islam. In his original statement, he said, yeah, he was dressed like a guy from a Nation of Islam, but I don't think he was because he wasn't acting like one. I don't know what that means. I don't know what a Nation of Islam guy acts like that's any different than the next guy who might be standing there with a bow tie. So I'm not sure exactly what that means, but that was his statement. I don't think he was a real NOI because of the way that he was acting. But he says a guy in a bow tie came walking up, looked suspicious. And you have to keep in mind that the previous night there was a confrontation with some guys from the Nation of Islam and Bad Boy at the Shrine Auditorium. So that's already in his mind as a bodyguard, as a security guy looking for threats. They've already had an encounter. He sees a guy, makes him uncomfortable, and then that individual kind of looks over at him and then turns around and walks up the street in the direction of where the shooting will ultimately take place. So yeah, that's great information. That's important information to know. But what ends up happening is over time, that story continues to just evolve and change. And that's where it becomes problematic. We have his original interview and we retained everything he said. It's all recorded. And the things that he's saying now and has been saying are not consistent with what he originally said. And so you've got to ask yourself, well, then what's the motivation? Why are things changing? Is it just to stay relevant? Is it to be sensational? Is it to get clicks? Because your story shouldn't be changing that much.
Well, didn't Lil Caesar, who was part of the the Biggie camp. Didn't he say something similar about a guy from the Nation of Islam? And I think this kind of promotes the Harry Billups theory,
Sure.
the Amir Muhammad theory. Because to this day, Gene Deal believes Amir Muhammad was the shooter. Am I right about that?
Well, I'm not exactly sure if he truly believes that. He's kind of committed to it now because of the fact that he identified him and said it's the shooter. So he's never going to change that, regardless of the evidence that works against that thought. But there may be some legitimacy to the idea that a Nation of Islam guy, real or not real, was somehow involved in what took place. I don't think that Poochie would have been in a position, if he's sitting in his car, to know exactly where Biggie was sitting. So maybe Poochie had a lookout. Maybe somebody was spotting. And so I can't discount that. All I can tell you with absolute confidence is that that guy that he saw from the Nation of Islam was not Amir Muhammad.
But last night you did say that both shootings, the Pac and Biggie, have conspirators. The theory that Pooch was alone in that car when he shot Biggie, but you believe they're conspirators in the Poochie shooting.
It makes the most sense to think there's at least one other co-conspirator, that somebody else may have been out on foot and said, okay, listen, we're watching, because you got to keep in mind that it took a while for them to get in their cars and to get out onto the street and to pull away. Somebody would have had to been in a position to say, hey, it's the second Suburban, Big's in the right front seat. So, because Poochie's not going to be in a position to go into the parking lot, see where they're at, then run, get his car, get back out on the street and be in a position to do what he did. So it would make the most sense that there is probably some communication between the car and somebody out there watching directly where Biggie's at.
There's a little bit of videotape from somebody that was standing across the street from the Peterson Museum. I don't know, it's like 15 seconds, 20 seconds.
Yeah.
Was that video useful at all? I mean, you could hear the number of shots, but other than that, was it useful?
Well, it was, because it showed, for one, the kind of mayhem that was going on around there. You saw the amount of people going on and all of the activity. You see Puffy pull out of the parking lot, and they're just kind of posted up for a minute out in the middle of the street waiting for Biggie's Suburban to pull up behind them. So you capture all of this, and so you can see clearly where Puffy's at in the car. You can see where his driver's at, and then you see where the shooting takes place, which is right there at the corner, because they keep the video rolling as everybody's jumping out of their cars, running over to Big and trying to attend to him. So yeah, there's value in it for sure. Every piece of information is potentially valuable.
Okay, is Gene Deal saying that he saw Amir Muhammad shoot Puffy? Biggie?
No, Gene's not saying that. Gene's saying that the guy that he saw that walked up and caused him to take note is Amir Muhammad.
So why they putting him out there like he's a killer, Amir Muhammad? Why they putting him out there like a killer if nobody said he was the driver, the man that pulled up and popped 9 times? Because I know ain't nobody in that car look their head up and say, oh, that was him. I know him from a T. While them shots was going. So how's they painting him to be the killer?
So circumstantially, what ends up happening is Little Cease, who's in the best position to actually see the shooter, he's right behind Biggie in the rear passenger seat. So that Impala would have pulled right up alongside. So the shooting takes place, and Little Cease says, shit, I ducked like anybody would. But there was that moment when I looked over and I glimpsed at the shooter, and he was wearing Nation of Islam type of attire.
We need a reenactment of that, because you're a cold cat to sit up and look at somebody that's dumping on you. I've been in that situation many times, and I'm not finished. Keep my head up to see who's shooting at me.
Yeah, so it might have been if we just take this, if we do reenact this in our minds and imagine that you're sitting in the back seat of that Suburban and you happen to look over and the shooting hasn't taken place yet, but you just happen to notice the car pulling up alongside of you and you see a guy in a suit, and then the gun comes out and then you duck. So there's a plausible reality that maybe C saw what he said he saw.
Yeah, I mean, that would be 2 seconds, maybe.
Just 2 seconds.
Yeah.
Is that enough to get a glimpse of somebody and send them to prison for the rest of their life?
No, but how often does few seconds of eyewitness testimony help land a conviction.
It don't.
It does. People get convicted on
Oh, I just had a glance
eyewitness.
of him.
Yeah.
It's sad.
Well, that in consideration with other information,
Yeah.
you know, because you've got,
Well, hopefully.
yeah, hopefully. So you have him go in Little Cease in G Money, Gregory Young, who was the driver of Biggie's car. They go and sit down with a forensic artist, and they draft up a couple of composites. Well, you look at these composites, and you know you can see what you want to see, you know. But they could be. There's a lot of people could look like these guys because the two composites don't necessarily even look alike. So that's problematic in itself.
One of them does look like Harry Billups.
Exactly, he
I
does.
looked at and whoever did that composite didn't know
Right.
anything about Harry Billups or
Right.
Muhammad. So is it just a coincidence that Lil C's, Gene Deal, whoever gave the information to the artist,
All
is a
black men look
coincidence?
alike.
Nah, it's the shape of his head.
All black men look
Nah,
alike.
there's a resemblance.
We
Well,
all got a twin.
Well, so this becomes even more difficult because the way that this individual is described by Eugene Deal does not match the individual that Little C saw. So their descriptions aren't consistent. So now you're like, okay, well, Eugene Deal believes that this guy that walked up was potentially the shooter and identifies Amir Muhammad, right? Well, in their descriptions, they're not consistent. So you have to take all these things into consideration and try to work through, you know, how do people's impressions affected? How's the lighting? How quick this took place? And the best thing to actually do as an investigator is to sit and listen to these guys talk. Not just take the written statements like, hey, he said he looked 24 to 25, a grayish to maybe light suit. When you listen to their actual interview tapes and you hear their voices, you get a very clear impression that they didn't see anything.
Exactly. Because,
Yeah.
but number one, Gene Deal is giving a description of a man that he saw standing by him, not of the shooter. What difference do that make? And then once again, his sketch is totally different from the picture that the other guy did. You know, his description. So what is his purpose? You feel me? I mean, everybody just
yeah. So Eugene Deal, I'm sorry to cut you
Yeah,
off,
go
but
ahead.
since we were here talking about Eugene Deal, after the investigators had interviewed him several times, they took a 6-pack, a photo lineup to him, and displayed that, and he picked out a guy in one of the positions that investigators knew had absolutely just some random guy, had nothing to do at all with this murder. But Eugene Deal says, yeah, that's what the guy looked like. And so now you've got at least what Eugene Deal's impression of that individual was. That guy looks nothing like Amir Muhammad. So then down the road, years later, Eugene Deal sees a picture of Amir Muhammad and says, that's the guy. Well, if that's the guy, why does he look so much different than the original guy that you said looked like him? And then you find out that Eugene Deal saw a picture of Amir Muhammad in XL magazine prior to seeing him in this photographic lineup. So he's seeing the same picture twice and then saying, well, XL magazine is identifying this guy potentially as the killer. Well, here he is in the 6-pack. Yep, that's the guy.
That's a cold person.
So what percent are you confident that the shooter was Wardell Foose, a.k.a. Poochie? Like, if you were going to put a number on it.
I'm really confident. I'm not as confident as I am with Orlando Anderson and Tupac. You know, I mean, there's just absolutely no doubt whatsoever.
100% confident on that.
100%.
But you can't say that for Wardell Foose.
For Wardell Foose, I'm probably closer to 95. Only because nobody can positively identify him as the shooter as we do with Orlando, right? But because of the information that was provided by the intermediary, by Suge's female accomplice, her description of everything, and her statement that it was Wardell Faust, that it was Poochie that she paid to do the hit, and then Poochie's own individual background as a hitter for Suge and being suspected of doing a whole bunch of other murders. Well, he's definitely capable of doing it. He fits the profile of somebody that would carry out something like that. So those things collectively make the best case for who the shooter is. Because aside from him, we don't have anybody else.
Yeah.
It's certainly not Amir Muhammad. That's conclusively been disproven.
That's 100% disproven.
That is 100%
There's
disproven.
not even a 5% chance he's the one.
There's not even a 0.5%
Okay.
chance that he's the one.
There's a second point here that Reggie wanted us to address, James. I'm not familiar with this. Phil Carson, former FBI agent, has a theory on this that I guess aligns with Randolph Sullivan's.
Yeah, again, I don't know this individual, never met him, so I can only criticize him professionally. And I think that he, like Russell Poole, has formed an opinion based on very loose circumstantial information and then refuses to accept the information that refutes that. And so he just sees one big, massive conspiracy that on its face is completely unbelievable.
Now you can understand some people might find it difficult that you're criticizing professionally a trained FBI agent, someone that should see everything you're saying. But you're saying, even though this guy's an FBI agent, trained by the most powerful government on earth, he still got it wrong.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying, and I'll tell you why. First, when he came on, he wasn't on the job or any. He was a young agent when he was assigned this case, and he came out of white collar crimes. Now all of a sudden he's dealing with this whole other element, and of course, he's given this informant, and he puts all of his credibility on this informant. Well, this informant's absolutely disproven, and we can unwrap that, and I can demonstrate to you how we can conclusively say that Michael Robinson was the name of this informant, was lying in regard to this case. For Phil Carson, he came on to this case back in, around the time that the lawsuit was being waged, because he read into these claims against police corruption and read into Russell Poole's allegations that David Mack was. So he opened up his own FBI investigation into the LAPD to probe into corruption. And he began to uncover things that, in his mind, was substantiating these claims. But he was relying on people who were lying. And instead of just accept and realize at some point in time that, you know what, I've lost my objectivity. And that's exactly what happened to Russell Poole. And so now all we have is an FBI version of Russell Poole out there, who refuses to accept the known facts instead of the speculation that is driving his narrative.
Well, the last thing that Reggie Wright wanted you to touch on, and I guess we've talked about this on the show before, Keefe D's confession.
We get so much of that.
Yeah, and I'm sure you've talked about it many times.
And by the way, let me let everybody know that I have Keefe D ready to do a Keefe D sit down. Me and Keefe D gonna sit down at the round table, and we're gonna discuss
Is that right?
the logistic.
I'm saying, is that right?
Yeah. He'd be here tonight at 8:30.
Oh, okay. Well,
So-
one question I do have about Keefe D confession is, why did it get leaked? Did you leak it? And that information being out there puts Keefe D in a very dangerous situation, something that he didn't even know he was being recorded at all the entire time. So how did it become public, this confession?
So when we sat down with Keefe D, myself, the FBI, Keefe D's lawyer, we sat down under what's known as a proffer agreement, and he divulged all of the details about what took place in Las Vegas the night Tupac was shot. At that point in time, we're just going through the investigative, kind of investigative process until I retired, and I came to the realization that these crimes, the public is never going to know what we did in this investigation and the information that we attained. And so I took it upon myself to say, listen, and I went and met with Keefe D before I did it, by the way. He knew that I was releasing the information. I went to his house. We sat in my truck, and I said, here's the deal. You're never going to probably get prosecuted on this, but I'm going to expose what you did. Wow. And I said, I'm just letting you know ahead of time. I'm writing a book, and I'm going to tell the story. And listen, you got a huge break on the dope case that we built against you, which was 25 to life. You're walking away on a murder. So if the punishment for you is that the public knows the truth about what you did, well, then that's just the fucking way it's going to be.
But it should have made him it shouldn't have hurt him. And that's not the part that's hurting Keefe D's situation. It's just the fact that people know that he sat down with the police and discussed his nephew. That's what's hurting him.
Yeah, well, I think it's two things that's going to hurt Keefe D for the rest of his life. One, that he got exposed as an informant, a snitch, in some way.
Not really.
However you want.
No.
Come on, man. When you're
gotta,
telling the police, this person killed that person.
But see, you got to look at it like this. My nephew is dead, and he took advantage of that because he was fighting 25 to life, right? He got caught with some drugs.
Yeah.
So if I can speak on this, my nephew and them, all these cats is gone. So if I can speak on that, he used that shit as a street ticket to get out of this situation.
Completely
and he
understand.
did that. But he didn't, what fucked him up is he didn't think that Greg was going to put it out there that you told on your nephew.
And that's my point.
Now here you got a man that made it beat a 25 to life 2 times.
I thought it was a smart move on his part because he knew that no one was going to go to jail, no one's going to prison, no one's getting indicted, and I get to go home.
Exactly.
But still, I'm talking about the way the public will perceive him.
Right.
One, you told. And two, now we know for sure you killed my favorite rapper in the world.
Well, hate him for that. Hate me for that. But
when you and I speak one little negative thing about Pac, they go in on us.
They do.
Now imagine how they're feeling about Keefe D.
Exactly,
You know,
exactly.
So you kind of put him out there on those two things, which
I did.
which could actually get him killed if he's not careful.
Yeah, and I'm not sorry I did it. You know, he's who he is. I told him what I was going to do. His response was, "Oh, fuck it then. I'm a gangster. I'll handle that shit." That's exactly what he told me. And said, "Okay, well, that's your decision. That's your life. That's you. Go do you." I'm telling the world what the fuck happened because this story is more important than you. In fact, I think this story is more important than your life.
So what was your process of getting that out to the public? Who did you turn to, and how did we all learn about this confession?
So I ended up getting a guy that was a professional writer, and we sat down and I said, you know, would you like to collaborate on this? And he said, yeah. And you know, I got a publishing contract with Random House, and we wrote the rough draft, and then Random House got it, and they read what was in the book, and they're like, we ain't publishing this, man. We ain't doing pointing some fingers at Puffy Combs. His office is right across the street from ours. We're not having that. He's very litigious, and he's just going to not, you know, appreciate what you're saying about him in this book. I was like, all right, well, I've got this material, and I know that I can defend it, and I think that when Puffy reads it, he's going to know it's true anyways, and that I wasn't in fear of being sued, and so I published it, and it ran its course.
Wow.
I just think it all should be over. Let these guys rest. We know ain't nobody going to jail for it. Everybody lost. Everybody lost something to somebody, you know, in this game, this death row thing. Nobody came out on top, period. Suge Knight, you know, $500-some million, 28 years in prison. Everybody lost. So I think it should be buried up under a rug somewhere, and people just need to accept what's really out there, the truth. The killers are dead. So you ain't finna get a conviction, let it go. But people still see money and other things in this. But it's over.
Well, Greg, can you tell everybody where they can get your book and let us know what's going on with you?
Yeah, so Murder Rap, you can find it on, you know, Amazon.com, anywhere where books are sold. You can download it. There's a digital version. And then, of course, that led to a documentary that's likely titled also Murder Rap. And then there's a series that's kind of loosely based on the book called Unsolved. It was on, excuse me, on Netflix last year.
I binge watched that a few months ago. It was pretty good.
It's pretty good?
Yeah. I mean, you go one episode into the next episode, and it was well done.
Good, thanks. Yeah, I thought so too.
That was USA, right? USA?
Originally it was USA, and then Netflix picked it up.
Okay.
Yeah.
So where can people find you? Are you on social media, on the internet, website?
Man, I'm so easy to find. Yeah, I've got a Facebook page, and I'm always, people ask me questions on Twitter. I just throw my email out there. So I'm always around and available to answer questions because I put myself out there, and so now I have to deal with the responsibility of that. And if people have questions, and nothing's off the table, because I feel that information is is power.
Sure is.
And
Sure
when
is.
people want to have closure, or they want to find out what took place with these two gentlemen, I'm going to do everything I can to get those facts straight.
I just have this one final question. We didn't get to talk about it, and I had it here in my notes, but I'm sure in your investigation, the Frank Liga and Kevin Gaines shooting came up. Mm-hmm. Was there anything about these two cops that had a road rage incident important in the investigation of the Biggie killing?
No, the only real connection between that incident and in the murder investigation was just the lead that Kevin Gaines was involved in a relationship with Suge Knight. I'm sorry, it was Suge Knight's wife.
Sharitha.
With Sharitha. Mm-hmm. And the car that he was driving the day that encounter took place was registered to her. And so for Russell Poole, what came to mind is like, okay, why is this LAPD officer involved in a relationship with this rapper's, this CEO's wife from this record label? So that was kind of for him, like, what's going on? Why are our officers mixing with these people? And then as that question began to get asked, we found out that there were quite a few cops from different agencies that were working for Death Row Records under Right Way Security. Well, that's problematic for law enforcement because it's from their perspective a conflict of interest. You've got an organization that is perceived as criminal to a certain degree, with a bunch of gang members hanging out and drugs being dealt around the studios and a bunch of people with guns, and then cops there providing security. So that was from the law enforcement perspective. That's unacceptable. You're not going to mix those worlds.
Once again, they gangsters too.
Kevin Gaines was never found to have been a corrupt cop, right?
No, there was a couple of road rage incidents.
It gets that label a lot, even though...
No, there's no indication that he was a corrupt cop. No, but he had a temper, and there was some reports about him having prior road rage accidents or incidents. And so when it came down to you really just only two people were there. One lived, one didn't. So now you're only left with the story of the guy who survived. And he says that guy pulled up and was creating problems with me, and I was defending myself. Well, it's kind of substantiated by the fact that, there was a pattern for Kevin Gaines to have doing that type of thing. He just never encountered another armed cop before.
Well, we're about to wrap up, but on that note, Frank Liga claims Kevin Gaines pulled his gun out first, and then he shot in defense. Okay. But if Kevin Gaines pulled his gun out first, wouldn't at least one bullet been fired? Something, some sort of shooting from his side come?
It's just pure speculation. If Gaines pulls his gun out really with no intent to shoot, he's just like, oh, I'm going to scare this motherfucker.
Okay, that's a possibility, yeah.
And then Liga's already got his gun out because he's a cop who's expecting problems. So, boom, he just shoots back real quick. That's probably the likely scenario.